So I've got some crazy 808 style kick drum glitches thing going on. So let's get this a bit softer. So you can do some pretty clicky stuff there. So yeah, what I've got going on is basically I've put lots of steps in, removed some steps, but it's based around the impulse generator, which is really useful. And I really like using the impulse because you can ping the resonance or ping a filter, and if you have the resonance high, you can basically make 808 style kick drums, which is great. The thing I found with the impulse generator on the rhythm was it was really clicky. Like the attack of like what would be for the 808 kind of kick sound was really, really sharp. And that it just kind of annoyed me. But I found you can actually use the attack and decay, which kind of makes sense now I think about it, but it didn't make sense on the sense of an impulse being really small, right? It's a really short thing. But it actually kind of creates quite a lot of sculptability. So it kind of makes me think like the attack and decay of like the envelope and the filter and the impulse are all like different across the rhythm. So where I kind of think it's going to be like a normal envelope, it's actually probably specific to a really small area of the impulse. But yeah, so you can make really clicky stuff, so you can make it short. And that's going through the reverb. So all that kind of crazy stuff with the reverb. You're hearing on the effects is the reverb. So I found the other thing with the impulses I really like is that you can, because the impulse is always going to be slightly different, especially when it collides over the top of each other. So when you've got one impulse and another one with the delay, they kind of make this kind of collision. You get this sort of phasing effect. You don't really hear it as a click because they're too short to hear. But if you hear it through effects, then you can hear the effect of that. So you get that kind of, kind of like a weird phasery kind of thing. So if I kind of play this without the reverb, it's kind of like, quite calm and textured, but that reverb's what, creates that kind of area. So if I put the clicks back on a bit more, nuts, isn't it? So also brightening the delay, brightening the reverb. It's quite good. So kind of fun. The other thing as I've got going on is I've got the filter set on the quick performance amount. So this is kind of, I always often do this because it's just handy just to have that flexibility to shape the sound, especially when you're kind of working with other parameters. But I found it really important with this one because we're talking about resonance here, and you can get into some really horrible, sharp, high frequencies if you're not sort of careful. So kind of having this hand is just kind of keeps that sort of tamed. So the other thing I've got going on is like the keyboard tracking thing. So you'd see in the description of the YouTube video that there's like a Google Doc or a Google Sheet thing that allows you to map like pitches to frequencies. So I've kind of mentioned this a few times, but you can have low notes that are like bassy and high notes that are sort of high frequencies, which kind of creates like, more movement, and it sort of sounds like the real life sounds, like, birds are high pitched and elephants are low frequency. Not that I've met one in person, but so yeah, these are the kind of settings you want, which is just 0 for the speed, and the mult being 1 doesn't matter because it's of 0 anyway. Setting it to your frequency, and this basically for each step you can see is all the frequency amounts, which is really cool. So you know, if I put like 44 and then it's set to 10, and if there's another 10 here, there probably isn't. Well, 8's close. You can see it's 40, 48. So 24 is 16, 24, 16 again. And you can kind of assign or adjust the frequency with the depth of the waveform, which is what I'm doing here. So let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that reverb a little bit, as much as I love it. So it's a broader range of lows and highs, but when you turn it to 0, it's going to centralize around the frequency. So you want to turn this back down a bit, maybe, unless you want to, go up there a bit. But kind of reminds me of the Luke Vire's album on Reflex, which is pretty cool. Lots of like 101 and 707s. If you've not heard that, go and check it out. I think there's like a 15-minute track that's just basically this sort of stuff with the 707. It's pretty good. Obviously, like with Luke Vibert funk, which we ain't gonna get here. Trouble is with that reverb, it just gets a bit boring after a while. So you want to be able to have, I don't know, to try to find ways to adjust it or something. Not sure. Kind of liking it dry all of a sudden, to be honest. Yeah, so I'm not sure what to do with it. I might not do anything. The other cool thing is with this sort of thing, you can, with the filter envelopes. I don't know if you can pick this up on YouTube, but there's some really interesting buzzing going on with the bass. I've got a bit of distortion, so maybe almost like a saturation or something. It's quite cool. Maybe a bit of... No, not feeling the reverb. Wobbling around. It's quite interesting. And you can get different types of kicks, a bit sharper. You can hear some really nice subs going on. We can make that longer, of course. I don't often make breakbeat stuff because it takes a long time, honestly. I'm kind of crap at it, but there's some good bases there for that sort of stuff, I would imagine. I'm kind of liking the spaciness though. So the other thing I've got is the, like I often do with the delays and stuff, because the rhythm, and I think this is the case with a lot of the Elektron boxes, is that they have all their tempos, like everything's like hooked to the main sequencer, which is great for a lot of purposes. But if you're used to using sort of hardware, or like lots of separate hardware boxes, obviously this is hardware, but lots of like outboard gear, and I am, then you know, I kind of started on tape echoes and things that they're never in time. So you kind of like develop these habits of sounds that are not quite in time, and then obviously Elektron come along and make these beautiful boxes that are perfectly in time. I really struggle with that. So this is a good way of getting around that. You can kind of, much like the filters, that the keyboard tracking I mentioned, it's basically exactly the same, but you set it to time on the delay. For those of you who watched the last video, like I already mentioned this, but you know, I was mumbling. The cool thing is you can get just a completely different feel very quickly with one dial, and it's very gradual. Yeah, I really don't like sitting there for ages like programming stuff. Like if there's sound going and I can kind of, and it's part of that, then it's okay. But if it's like the rhythm especially seems to be something you've got to really sit and put lots of time in designing your sounds, and I find that quite tedious. So I like to get something going and have the flexibility and immediacy of listening and sculpting. Maybe it's just how I've been using it, but I find setting up these little processes here with the keyboard tracking and the delays helps me a great deal. Changes the tempo feel. You can get like close to being in time but slightly off. And you get these kind of micro stacks like there. And I kind of like that bit now, right? So you kind of don't get that unless you kind of play around with it. I kind of feel like I want to move around the filter of the delay a bit. One thing I always forget actually with the delay thing is you've got to put trigs down. I've not done that, so let's whack some trigs down. And that means every time it's going to adjust on that bit. It kind of works without, but this works better. It's more subtle. There we go. I always forget to put those bloody tricks down. Maybe Elektron should put more lights on it to remind me. Seems to be what they like doing. So I think what I'm going to do, just quickly record some automation. I kind of forget this does that. It's just easy and quick, isn't it? See what our clicks are sounding like. Bit of grip. So I also really like that, like I mentioned before, you can just kind of adjust the frequency and you can never get it exactly as you want, back to the point, but then you get that variation, which I think saves programming it, doesn't it? Reverb, but as a texture, sometimes can be quite interesting. Save programming chords, which is kind of annoyingly difficult on this. Compressor, obviously, hammering a bit. The only thing with the reverb is like if the decay is really short, it's mono, and if it's really long, it's really wide. Wish they'd kind of had that two separate dials, but you know, it doesn't matter too much. Some techniques. Move that trigger line. Sounding better, right? So you can hear that stuff in the stereo. That delay is slightly out of time. That's a little bit of something. works really, isn't it? I shouldn't complain too much. I think we'll leave it there. Cheers.